Welcome to our joint webinar. I'm Tom Sherrington from the WalkThrus, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Josh Goodridge. Hello, Josh.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
And Rachel Ball.
Hello, everyone.
And we are basically going to do our best as we keep, I'll be on the admitting duties here to explain what we both do in our different platforms, and most importantly, how they work together. So we discussed that the best way to do this would be for Rachel to compare and then chip in based on her experience actually as a user of these things. So I'm going to man the mating room while I hand over to Rachel. So over to you.
And Tom, I've just spotted that Matt is here.
Excellent. Hi, Matt.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. So I've been given the very exciting job of interviewing Tom and Josh. So we're going to start by finding out a little bit about what the individual platforms do and how they work. And then we're going to look at how they can work in sync together. So if we start off with WalkThrus. So Tom, would you just do us a little bit of a demo about what WalkThrus does?
Okay, so let me get my screen sharing on. Hopefully you'll see my screen there. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
So just to give you an overview, this is our website when you first log in, and the main sort of resource that we have there is a Google site where we just use Google technology to host a whole range of resources for lots of different techniques, which I'll show you in a second. And below that we have a whole range of tools where our package is really about you designing a whole CPD system. So a lot of our emphasis is on designing the CPD, and we have things like slide decks, trainer notes, workbooks, all sorts of things like that, which help you plan a professional development program overall. If I just use this quick start guide, so we have this quick start guide. I think this gives a good flavor of the kind of the thing that we typically do in schools with WalkThrus. So we go in and we encourage schools to do this in their school. So to start off with, share the rationale. What are we trying to do? Get people thinking about the reason why learning is difficult, what teachers should be thinking about in lessons to help children learn more successfully. So we support people with some of the summaries of research and so on, and to explain the concept of why 5-step guides to techniques might help you develop better habits in the classroom. So we're trying to make a link between the walkthrough as a structure and the learning problems you're trying to solve. And that's kind of a lot of our attitude to this is problem solution. So what are the problems you're trying to solve? Like, here's some solutions. Then we suggest people to select a core set of techniques. And we didn't start off by doing that. We've come to the conclusion that it's really powerful in a school to have a common understanding, a shared language around a set of techniques which the school decides. This is the way we kind of do things here. It could be in a department or a phase in a primary school, or it could be in a whole school. It could be like when you come to our school, that we use whiteboards, think, pair, share, and some other techniques, and we all do it. So welcome to our school. Here's our toolkit that we think it's useful to us all use. So we think that's a useful starting point, because then you can get into how to do them well and so on. And because teachers have quite a lot of common problems, we feel like there's a lot of energy dissipated in each teacher sort of doing stuff as if they're the first teacher to ever encounter this issue. It's like we can cut to the chase of it and say, what are the common problems we have in this school? Let's kind of identify some common solutions as a core. We don't call it the basic set because we're not saying these are easy for like the beginner teachers or something. We think they're core because everyone uses them all the time, even if they're very experienced. And then we get into this whole thing of the training, model the techniques. So we encourage schools to run training, showing teachers how the techniques work, and then getting into the CPD cycles of observation, coaching. And crucially, we think leaders of that need to be trained. So that's essentially our system. You can see in there, coaching is one of the bits of that, which is one of the hard bits, which is why we think our partnership with Steplab is awesome. And the last bit at the end, it says see it through, because we're really trying to help schools to sort of sustain this over months into terms into years, and that's actually the hard bit. So that's kind of our rough overview. Now when you get into the toolkit, so if I click on our website where all the tools are housed, you've got this sort of basic framing of all those techniques. And if I were just to select something like explaining and modeling, you'll find that there's a whole range of techniques which all link to the books that we've written, and they're in these hexagons. The hexagons are just icons. And one of our pitfalls, which we'll come on to later, is when schools get too sort of surface about this and just think, oh, we all know what metacognitive talk is, we all know what live modeling is, and you don't get under the bonnet of it. So if I click on that, it takes you to the page for live modeling, and here we have the steps. So this is a walkthrough. It's a 5-step guide to a common teacher technique, and the status of those steps is they're not the law. They are a framing of a technique which allows you to think hard about why to do it, whether you do it, what you might do differently. And it's a set of prompts, more or less, for discussion and for reflection. And then if you're going to adapt it, you're going to adapt it from a secure base that your colleagues are also adapting it from, rather than everyone making up the technique for themselves. So there are lots of those. What we have found, though, and this is something we've developed over the last 2 years, is that the idea that techniques always come together. We find that clustering of techniques is a very useful concept. And so we developed the whole thing called cluster tools. So let me show you a couple. We've developed a few. There's a master one called the problem solution tool. There's one based on Dylan Williams' formative assessment. There's one based on Rosenshine's principles, and there's one for special needs. But essentially what this does is it allows you to look at how techniques might combine. So we start off by looking at the classroom. There's a picture of the classroom there, and these are some common problems. So when you're looking at your core techniques, let's have a look at some common problems. So for example, how do I get all students' attention? Well, if I click on there, it takes me to some of the walkthroughs that link together. Signal, pause, insist, cold calling, live modeling. And I can look at a sort of a range of things and the way they link. Each one of those is a 5-step walkthrough, but there's a kind of way that they link up, which allows you to think, yeah, I don't only ever do cold calling by itself. I do it I'm live modeling, and then I'm checking how that's going. At each point, like, here's another one. How do I involve all students in questioning? Well, show me boards, think, pair, share, cold calling. We think those three are like the absolute bedrock of responsive teaching. But then you've got to vary from that. What if they say, I don't know? What if your bias is as such you're not asking all the students? And so randomized questioning comes into play in connection with the other things. At every stage, though, if I click on the link, it takes me to the steps. So no opt-out is a 5-step walkthrough. It's not just the phrase. So our problem solution tool allows you to consider the combination of techniques. And then just to show you what that looks like in practice and some of the work we've done, here's a bunch of schools, clusters that they designed themselves from a group of schools. This one's in Leicester Primary Partnership. And you can see they're all different. They're all bespoke to the school. They design them themselves. They've got their logos on them. But it represents a thinking through of the challenge. So here's one I think is quite a nice one to explore. So for example, Spinney Hill, they've thought they want 3 main clusters to focus on in this current at the moment, and one's for checking for understanding, one's for expectations, and one for retrieval. And within that, they've highlighted the ones they're working on this year. And it's within that then that the coaching and the CPD will be focused, because we've got this broad frame. So for example, they explained to me that multiple choice questions is there with retrieval, because they felt that their do now activity, their sort of starters, were taking too long, and they weren't getting to the bit where what don't you know and why, and let's discuss it. So they thought if we focus our retrieval practice starters around with multiple choice questions, we can say, right, what's the answer? okay, quite a few of you have put B, that's wrong, so let's talk about that. And they felt that was like a really efficient way of getting retrieval practice into the classroom. So there we go. So the rationale for the selection is part of the process itself, which we think is great. But then what that school now has got is a nice sort of subset of all the possible techniques, which helps them focus their training, their team meetings, their learning walks, and their coaching. And each teacher will have their own agenda within that. So a teacher might be thinking, well, I'm trying to work on probing questions. And they said this was an issue for them because they weren't always confident asking those probing questions. So if I put this into sort of present mode, those would be hyperlinks, and that school only needs that set of techniques. So that they could work on others later, but that's enough to be working on. So that's our essentially what an overview of what our toolkit does. We start off with this sort of big sort of library of techniques, which feels like it's sort of overwhelming and there's so many things, you're scrolling, and we've created tools which allow you to create clusters of core techniques and then run your training around that. Just final thing to say is let's say for each one of them, just so you know what there's there, if you've not seen this before, not as well as the steps which are in the books, we also have tools like a video. There's always a video of me explaining it. And quite a lot of schools tell us, they say they're like, we do our training, we say, here's Tom, he's going to explain to us what he thinks deliberate vocab development is. And it's like a 7-minute video. And then they discuss it. And they found that if everyone's heard the same intro, it gives them a kind of an external voice sort of saying, well, here's an idea, what do you think? And then they can just rip it apart and discuss it. And the slides, some schools prefer to use the slides because they can just click through the ideas and so on. So these are the tools that we provide. So I think that's probably enough. I'll stop there and hand back to you.
Thank you, Tom, for that walkthrough of WalkThrus. That was super helpful. So, Josh, on to you. Please, can you demonstrate a little bit about what Steplab does as well?
I can try. May I have screen sharing enabled, please, Tom?
That sounds reasonable. There we go.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, what a brilliant tool WalkThrus is. I'm just increasingly obsessed with how good clustering is as a way for getting people to think through how techniques fit together. So Steplab's kind of more narrowly focused on one specific challenge for schools. I started out trying to design, well, I started out leading instructional coaching in a school that I worked in a number of years ago called Oasis Academy South Bank. I tried to lead it. I'd read all about instructional coaching being the best way to help teachers improve, which the evidence suggests that it kind of is. I found it very difficult. And so basically Steplab, it was called Powerful Action Steps back in the day, is just to see, all it does is quite narrowly help schools to work towards implementing high quality professional development through instructional coaching. So with that in mind, I'm going to take you through how we try to do that. Okay. So I'm going to start off by showing you our library. It's not super different to the WalkThrus one. Sadly, we don't have the brilliant idea of clustering, but it is basically content that powers instructional coaching conversations. So I'll take you into what we call our core steps. Our core steps being like what things that kind of pretty much across every classroom, every teacher is doing. And I'll zoom out and show you a little bit of the additional stuff. But I want to show you the structure of how our content supports powerful coaching conversations. So within our core steps, we boil things down into kind of 5 what we call persistent challenges of teaching, the things that every teacher needs to do, for example, secure attention, optimize communication, drive thought, gather and give feedback, or ensure consolidation. Inside each of these, we have what we call goals. Goals are kind of meaty but manageable areas of a teacher's practice that they might want to improve, but that's probably going to take them more than a week. For example, you'd never say to someone, oh, you need to use paired talk in your lesson and expect them to do it. That would be the focus of X number of days or weeks for someone to implement, right? That's what we think of as a goal. Now, inside these goals, we boil it down to our action steps. And basically all of these action steps may need to be used to help someone use paired talk, or just 1 or 2 of them might be, depends on where the teacher is. And these kind of start with like the most basic or things to do with planning how to do the thing, and then they move to executing. For example, you need to select appropriate questions for paired talk before you can do paired talk at all. Now I'm just going to scroll down to use right pair share, which is an important potential thing that someone might need to use paired talk well. Now, again, what I found is that just setting someone that step as a coach or saying, do you fancy working on that? See you next week is probably not enough to help them improve. You have to do something else. And so underpinning each step is a bunch of additional content that powers effective coaching. Here's the step. And the step itself comes with a success criteria. For example, good paired talk has right pair share has instructions that are specific and concise. Key ideas for the right are displayed on the board. Timings are very precise. And once the teacher sets students off, they do a scan. This is an example of what we call a success criteria. Now, importantly, each of the steps on Steplab comes with a video. We've filmed multiple teachers across multiple contexts, and we're adding new video all the time. And that is where a teacher is doing that thing in a really expert way so that the coach and coachee can analyze it, use the criteria, talk about what's happening so that it helps you more like to be able to do the thing yourself. Here's an example.
What is good about this piece of work? What is a strength, hands down? Pens at the ready. Writing down one strength from this.
I'm not sure if the sound was coming through there, but it doesn't really matter. So there's a video, and oftentimes we'll have multiple instances of the step in a Key Stage 3, in a Key Stage 2, in a Key Stage 4 classroom. And anytime we use a step, it's marked in yellow on the video. Each step comes with what we call a rehearsal task. And a rehearsal task is quite specifically what the coach and the coachee would do together to plan that technique into someone's practice. And then finally, the steps come with what we call an insight study module. And that basically is like a mental model building piece of study that someone can do to really understand. So it has like a kind of intro, and then there'd be a model to watch and some analysis that you could do after you watch the model, which Steplab, I haven't done question 3, naughty Josh, which Steplab then marks for you, and then some evidence summaries and case studies, etc., etc. So you get the picture. Now that's how our content looks. Every part of it really designed to power coaching. And the core is kind of the heart of, like what we consider to be effective general teaching. We then have the same stuff in early years Key Stage 1, for example, phonics. And then we have some specialist steps, some subject specific like geography, history, something, and some kind of for non-teachers like pastoral leadership and support, or steps for teaching assistants, all with video, etc., etc. Now, the purpose of all that stuff is for use in a coaching conversation. So really what Steplab does is it helps people to use that content through how we power the observation and feedback process. So I'm going to go ahead and coach Suzette. I'm going to go and see Suzette's lesson. I'm going to do this really quickly, so I'm not going to fill everything in like I really would, but I take 15 minutes to go and see Suzette by clicking observe. I would start off by capturing notes about what I see. I may decide to scan this QR code with my phone and film a video of her in practice. It uploads to Steplab, deletes from the phone. It's all GDPR compliant. I would then look at her previous step and decide whether she'd achieved it. I would plan some praise here. And importantly, I would plan a question to ask her about her achievement. Steplab suggests a question to use for coaches that are newer, but of course, at any time, you can write your own question. Therefore, we structure the process, but it's also highly adaptable to lead to kind of responsive coaching. I would then go into choosing a step. So I might decide to set the right pair share step that we just looked at. I have some questions like, around teacher perception, noticing, understanding that I would ask a teacher to lead them there. Steplab suggests some good sentence stems, like tell me about the moment where I noticed, what impact did, and how could we? Aim is to lead the teacher to understanding what to do next without us just immediately just telling, because we don't want to just tell, because telling doesn't help people to think about solutions. We have a place for planning some custom modeling. So I might decide I want to do some specific stuff. We have the model, which the coach can watch. And then we have a gap analysis question to ask. And again, all this stuff is served up but it can be completely, I'm bad at typing. It can be completely customized. So that, like, at first, when you're learning to coach, Steplab really helps you by saying, well, this is an important question to ask at this point, but I can be like, no, I don't want to ask that question. I want to ask another question. That takes about 10, 15 minutes of watching the teacher. I click finish. And then when I'm ready to sit down with Suzette, I click give feedback, and it takes me through that process. So I read the praise that I have suggested. Suzette, thanks for having me in your lesson. It was really effective when. Ask Suzette a question. You get the picture. Move to asking the questions about the evidence from the lesson. Share the step and see if she's up for it. Have a look at the model with Suzette and ask our questions about them. And finally move to working through the rehearsal task. Maybe we did 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 rounds of rehearsal before we move to a final implementation question. Okay, Suzette, we've talked about trying to make that work. What are you going to remember to do to try and make that work? How are you going to keep track? What might get in your way? Suzette takes some notes, and then we say, well, I'll pop in at the beginning of the lesson to see you next week. And that's how Steplab manages like that coaching conversation. Now, just like Tom, we recognize that the quality of coaching is super important. Like, you have to be good at coaching for the impact of coaching to happen. And so what Steplab does is we have on platform something which we call our coaching skills builder. And that is essentially 20, or is it 19? 19 modules which break down how to be a highly effective coach. For example, I want to learn how to ask gap analysis questions when I'm coaching. I can click here. It gives me kind of an introduction video of someone that looks like they got a shiny face. It's got a video of some real coaching.
A teacher said, great work, Sadi.
So you can see that in practice, some stuff to read, a little quiz, which I won't show you, and then something to do to commit to making that change. And the idea behind that is that coaches would probably work through that as they get used to it in bits, so that they slowly but surely learn how to really adapt the coaching protocol I showed you for themselves. That's really the heart of what Steplab does. It kind of has a general intro to how we work.
Thank you very much, Josh. So obviously we've now got this really exciting collaboration between WalkThrus and Steplab. So now that we've seen both platforms individually, how do they sync together then? How can they be used in tandem?
Tom, have you got anything to say about that before I show it?
Yeah, can I just go back to share for me first, because I want to just show you kind of where we just see this working. So this is where, you know, in WalkThrus world, we do have some coaching support. So you've got things like videos of me. Sorry, it's always me. I'm sorry about that. Coaching some people, and you know, some documents which we can use, and they're all Google documents. They're very raw. You just copy and paste them, and there's some guidance, and this works up to a point. And you know, for example, one of our documents that is quite popular is this: you can paste in any walkthrough into there. It's just Google cut and paste a screenshot, and then you've got the same thing. So this is where we feel there's alignment from the beginning. Although Josh has developed his own, in fact, it has, you know, just written an absolute drop dead epically great book about coaching. Yeah, and we're all trying to support teachers to do this. Our materials are very dependent on the teacher knowing, sort of, working their way through it. So we try to scaffold it. We use the Bambrick Santoyo 5 Ps process: precise, praise, probe. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the action step? Let's practice and let's plan ahead. So we have the same framing of that. And in our training, we're saying, when we're observing a lesson, you know, plan your praise, plan your probing question, plan the action steps. It's exactly the same. It's just that one of the challenges we have is, well, how? What happens? What do I say? And there's a lot to learn. It's a steep learning curve. And what Steplab, we feel, offers to people who use WalkThrus is just that structure for getting into that. So when they said they could house our material inside the Steplab platform, we were going, whoa, okay, that's awesome. So you're doing the stuff we're trying to do in a sort of slightly organic Google Docs format, which some people like because it's very flexible, but it's sometimes slightly overwhelming. So the system of Steplab kind of it walks you through it. So that's what I want to show first, to sort of show the alignment we already have in our thinking. Right, now back to you, Josh. Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
So Tom, tell me, who is most likely to coach who? Tom coaching Ollie Cav, or Ollie Cav coaching Tom? Just help me out here.
In terms of coaching for what is the question?
Well, you know, on improving as a teacher.
Well, I would probably coach him.
Okay.
Although he's got a lot to say about teaching, and yeah, so yeah, there is that. Who coaches who is a big issue, and a lot of schools we go to, capacity for who has the skills and the confidence to do the coaching is a massive problem.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's one of the key things that people have to solve to make it really work in their context. So with the proviso that this is I'm going to log in as Tom coaching Ollie. I'm going to show you how the two tools are integrated together. So I'm going to share screen again. And here we go. Okay, give me a second. Here we go. Logging into WalkThrus. So we've already taken you through what Steplab offers regarding our content. But importantly, a ton of the schools that we worked with were like, well, we really love the WalkThrus, the way that they've structured their content, the way that we can do clustering. And so what schools were doing is they were using the Steplab content and going into our playbook editor and like artificially making it. And that was kind of unsatisfying. Firstly, because it's work that people do not need to be doing. And secondly, because the way that WalkThrus present it is just so gorgeous. And so we were thrilled to be able to work with WalkThrus and actually put the content on the site. So rather than entering the Steplab content in the global library, if you work with both of us, you just need to let Steplab know, and we will activate the WalkThrus content such that popping up in your library will be WalkThrus. And you will find here all the books. Where shall I go, Tom? Muted.
I don't know, go to questioning and feedback.
Okay. And then maybe feedback.
We're going to go to core questioning techniques, because we talked about pair share earlier. That we can just, that's it. So
lovely. And then we've got some of those kind of meaty but manageable goals. Which one shall I choose?
Let's go for show call, which was the one that I had on my screen earlier.
Show call. Lovely. And what you have here is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 action steps, exact like same text as in the 5-step guide. And then structured similarly, it's not exactly the same what's underneath, but if you click on any of these, so it's like, well, I understand the whole guide, but this week I'm going to focus on circulating and monitoring. Then underneath that is the additional information, exactly where our success criteria were, and then the entire WalkThrus guide laid out exactly as it is on Tom's site. Difference being that you would use this in coaching. So I would go ahead, I'm Tom, and I would go ahead and coach Ollie. I would observe, capture my notes, do my praise, etc., etc. This time, I'm heading into WalkThrus. Where were we? Feedback. Oh, no, we weren't. We were in questioning.
Core questioning techniques, show call.
Circulate and monitor. And so I've selected that step. Plan my questions, plan my model, plan my question about the model, finish, and then deliver that feedback in exactly the same way. But this time, all of that WalkThrus content is available there for the coach to select and work through. And importantly, schools can actually like do their own, we don't call it clustering, but schools can use all of the content available, including the WalkThrus content, to build their own playbook. And so exactly as you talked about, Tom, that this extreme power of like choosing which bits to go in, lots of the schools that work with both of us do like move your content around inside Steplab to make their own playbooks as well.
I actually think the integrity, the kind of the fidelity of the walkthroughs in your platform is remarkable, and you can really genuinely read the book essentially in Steplab. So nearly all the content that we have on our slides, so every bit of content that we have on WalkThrus, our website, is in Steplab. And for the techniques, there's some additional stuff we have around some of the background reading and so on, but we didn't think that was needed here. And for me, this is where, you know, we think the power is there, that if you're trying to set up, and remember, I think it's worth reinforcing the thing that Josh, you said at the beginning about your sort of single focus is, you know, the quality of one-to-one instructional coaching as the main thing. And so that's the thing we find is the hardest thing to do really well. Quickly, you have to work towards it. It's a training process. It's a ramp. You walk up slowly.
Yeah.
But scaffolding that process in that intense way. So one of the things I think that even just as you were going through it is, and this is what people report back, is this is, I think, what's so interesting is that you make explicit the fact that to coach requires a lot of thinking through, and because you're prompted to do all that, you're doing that. And eventually a skilled coach can automate those thought processes and deliver the coaching feedback session. But it makes you realize how, seeing it laid out that way, that's what you're training people to do, that thinking, and it's not a given. But if you've been through it a few times, am I right in saying that you can sort of kind of skip steps if you want to, because you kind of know what to say in the conversation? Do you know what I mean? You've got the option to be prompted or kind of go, yeah, okay, we can move past.
Absolutely. Like my approach, you know, I'm still coaching pretty regularly, not as much as I did last year, but I actually plan. I mean, if someone looks at one of my coaching plans and they're always a bit surprised at how much I write, because I just like, it's like, you know, actually the more experience I got at teaching, I didn't just stop lesson planning. I just planned the material that I knew would be most useful for me. You know, it's like, actually, like I would put more time into writing a really good multiple choice question when I was 10 years in than I did in year one, even though I took a lot less time to plan the lesson, right? It's the same with me as a coach. Like I actually put a lot of work in, but what importantly, like I don't necessarily stick to my plan. Like if I ask, you know, the diagnostic question, like tell me about the moment where, which is, I know that Matt and I both agree is like a super important question to check on teacher perception. Matt wrote a brilliant blog about it very recently. This is WalkThrus Matt. I don't know if everyone can see him, but he's here. I can see him. There he is waving. Like I would pretty much always ask that question, but depending on the answer I get, I might just be like, scrap everything I planned and go down another path, or I might stick really religiously what I planned. I think the point is that having it planned really helps me. And I think for less experienced coaches, like they're just probably more likely to stick with the plan they make. And I think that's fine.
And I think, I mean, I was going to stress this again, because in the same way I showed our simple document, the name of that document is a coaching session planner. That is for the coach to plan the session they then do with the teacher. It is 100% not the thing you email them. Like, so we make a big play of this. Like, feedback should be co-constructed. You should be with the teacher, present to discuss the lesson. And when you're observing them, you have that in mind. So you're thinking to that meeting, going, okay, precise praise, probe, what are the action steps? And your knowledge of the steps we think is really helpful, which is why we find the WalkThrus reference. Like, do you know the steps that you might suggest? Do you observe them in the lesson? And then always focusing on your outcome being an agreed plan of action. So now that's the same. So, I mean, Rachel, you're not only working with Steplab, but you're also a user. Does that sound bad? So, I mean, that's right. So when you were using Steplab, you're planning your coaching, but then you sit with a teacher and what's the status of the Steplab kind of in the conversation there?
I think, as you said before, it's a scaffold for the conversation. So I think having that time to really script and plan the conversation is really important. I think coaching is one of those things which looks easy, but actually when you dig into the detail that's involved in it to make it really effective, it's actually quite complicated and requires quite a lot of thinking on the part of the coach. So for me as a Steplab user, it was the scaffold for the conversation, and making sure that the key components of a coaching conversation are all really carefully thought about. So I know if I just told the coaches in my school to coach, then they may well not have done the modelling very effectively or the rehearsal very effectively. But the way they're prompted to do that on Steplab, I think, was really powerful for us. And then the way that I could then dig into that data as the coaching lead and be able to look across the platform and see, well, who's coaching really well or who maybe needs more support with their coaching. And obviously, you can't tell exactly what's been said unless the feedback is recorded, but you can on Steplab look at the coaching scripting that's being done and then give the coach some feedback. And then it ties it all in with your CPD program as well for your coaches. So you can say, you know, we've done some training around praise and what good praise should look like. I'm now reading all your feedback conversations and seeing that some of the scripting of praise isn't quite what I would have wanted or what we talked about in our CPD. So let's go back and let's do that again, or pointing them to the coaching skills builder to do some more work through the training. So yeah, the scaffolded conversation and then the way that you as a lead can then have some oversight of what's going on in those conversations for me was really powerful.
Yes, that's encouraging, because this is I think we're going to come on and talk about some of the pitfalls, but this is where you know, we feel we have to lay the territory for this, and you can have too much system and not enough system. So we find both of those are problematic. So not enough system means, you know, go and coach, and you're like, well, how? You know, they haven't got an agreed protocol, so they're not saying, oh, we're doing this model of coaching or with this system, and we're saying, so yours is almost identical to the Banbrick Centoio one in detail. I mean, in detail it isn't, but in principle, precise, praise, probe, and we feel that's such a useful way of doing it. And so to the point where now, when we're doing work, I would say, you know, you don't have to use this. We're not the police. You can do what you like. But is there a better way to do it than that? What precise praise, and then how precise? The system around referencing steps in a commonly used toolkit is so helpful. So you don't have 30 teaching pairs around the school, everyone making up teaching as if they've never seen it. We've got a common language. So you can have not enough system. And then we feel that where schools are really precise about the process, the frequency of sessions and so on, everything's better. But you can have too much system. So even a simple form. So we've been to some schools where, you know, from one visit to the next, they'll say, oh, how are you going? They'll say, oh God, SLT have made us fill in all these forms now. Well, that's not what anyone said to anyone, but that's what they feel is happening, because now they're writing stuff on documents that previously they just were chatting about. And that feels to them like,
uh-oh, we might have briefly lost Tom.
Are we
Tom,
there? You can hear me?
Yeah, you're back now. You're back. We lost the last like maybe 5 seconds. What you were saying?
Oh, so yeah. So sometimes they say, we've been told we're doing walkthroughs now, and we have to fill in these forms, and we have to say, okay, so let's just roll that back. What you're doing is coaching and CPD using the toolkit of walkthroughs, and the form is just there to help. So use it the least amount possible.
Yeah.
No, don't write that much. So what's your equivalent of?
Yeah, good question. I think like for me, it's like it's a kind of having a purpose in mind thing. So we have lots of tools on Steplab. We didn't show like all of them, but they're all designed, as you said, lovely expression is a ramp towards coaching, right? For example, we often work with a school and they've got big cultural, one of the big 4 pillars of making coaching work for us is like building culture. Now, oftentimes, if there's not a culture in place, it's because teachers are terrified about having people in their lesson because of like bad stuff that senior leaders did in the past, right? Like going in and telling people off the whole time, basically. And so what we try to do is we try to support schools to build, to like stop people being scared and build that culture where visiting lessons is valuable through these kind of very low, even lower than coaching stakes kind of observations called drop-ins. And as part of a drop-in, we allow people to shout out each other, which is an expression I stole from Oasis Academy South Bank, which is what we used to do. We used to go in and like write a postcard, and it was great. And then no one was scared about having people in their lessons. Now, that's not a good thing to do, right? But why are we doing it? We're doing it to build culture so that we can work towards coaching. Okay. Now, I think part of the problem is that sometimes people can get stuck with the thing. And actually, like, importantly, the good thing about instructional coaching, I think, is that the journey is just as good as the destination, right? You're on a journey to improve your school so that coaching will work. And each part of the journey makes your school better. You build culture, that's just better. Teachers talking about teaching, visiting lessons. You remove practices and build space for coaching, that's better. Even if you didn't ever get to the coaching, that's better, right? That just makes your school better. These are called spillover effects. And they're widely measured in the literature. Basically, in having a peer coaching program makes teachers better, even if they aren't receiving coaching, according to the research. Now, it makes sense. But the problem is, the barrier there is if you stop at a point and you start doing the thing because it's a thing and not because you're trying to get to somewhere else. So what are we doing? We're doing shout outs. Why are we doing them? Because shout outs. And then loads of people are doing shout outs and nothing else is happening. And it's like, okay, great. You've built culture now. Clearly you have, because of the 20 trillion shout outs, which are not really you've stopped improving now. So you've got to take it to the next rung and then the next rung. And for me, that's how you stop things getting bent out of shape, is having the final purpose in mind and making sure that you remember that you're on a journey. Would you agree with that, Rach?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think and the way that drop-ins and shout-outs are used as well, I think it's really important to tie that into your whole school PD program. Because I think if everyone's just shouting out, random things that, someone brought me a cup of tea this morning before I started my lesson, that's not helpful either. So really thinking about the content of your drop-ins is important, and your shout-outs, and making sure they're tied to your PD program. And like you said, that there's a link between what you're doing in whole school PD to what's going on in coaching to then what's being seen in drop-ins. And one of the things that I really like on Steplab as well is that when you do a drop-in of someone who's being coached, you see their coaching step. So you know what they're working on, so you can then give them really specific feedback on that, and then tying everything together, I think, is really useful. But yeah, I mean, I think like with anything, there's some leaders get stuck with the system, and it's getting out of that cycle.
Tom, what's a kind of I don't know what we call this. When we had a brief talk about planning this yesterday, and I continuously used the word fetishizing, which I said I wouldn't use on this call. But Tom, how do you feel like things get bent out of shape regarding implementation of walkthroughs or PD of that kind?
Yeah, so I suppose our biggest sort of sense to when things we think that we haven't quite got it right is when people have obsessed about, we call it a blockbuster effect, for the hexagons in multicolors across the board. The assistant head teacher in charge of teaching and learning is super keen and sort of thinks like that they've made displays because it's visual, and we've got the colored hexagons, and there's a lot of them, and you think, okay, but what's the pathway from you having made that display to a teacher teaching more effectively? And and especially if that teacher then so if you say to them, so which of the steps of such and such technique do you find your teachers find challenging? And they don't really know the steps. So you go, okay, so look, you need to get under that. Those are the names of the techniques. They're not anything more than that. And just because they make sort of sense in a common sense sort of way, doesn't mean we all agree what they are. So the steps are what drive the walkthroughs. And we could have called them as step 1 or step 72 or something. They've got a name because it helps convey meaning, but the real power is try this and then focus on that, and it's the detail. So that's our issue. It's sort of surface treatment. And the other one is the kind of tricks and tips approach, walkthroughs of the week kind of thing. The idea that you kind of just promote endlessly new ideas. And because there's a lot of ideas in walkthroughs, sometimes people get a bit dazzled by it. And we've even had in the first year, people said, why have you brought out book 2? We haven't even finished book 1 yet. Okay, well, you finished. I mean, you don't finish teaching, do you? It's sort of, we've produced more things to think about. That's all, because they're already in the system. We always can say, we haven't invented any of this. It's all just curated stuff that people use. So we feel it's so important to get this sort of balance between breadth and a broad view of what teaching involves, and being aware of multiple things at the same time, but then focusing on to improve on a very tight set, hence the core. And we promote that more and more these days, because to help people say it's okay, there's stuff in the background and it's part of teaching, but you can have a core which is really fundamental, and design it in that way. So I suppose that's those are our main ones. In terms of system, like implementation, I think one of the things we find is that the training input is undercooked sometimes. So if you're coaching somebody, and we can say more about this, but it's a bit, we put a lot of emphasis on, say, multiple teacher teams being coached in pairs or threes or teams, because we find it works well. But in the context of, say, the Steplab integration, we find that it's, if we can watch a video, which is powerful in what you provide there, but we feel like if we've experienced the full training session where we model, we discuss, we talk about pitfalls, we maybe even rehearse and enact, and we talk about it's non-examples, it's not this, it's that. If the coach and the person they're coaching have shared that training, then their knowledge of the steps is deeper, and you can get more quickly to how to do it well, whether it's happening. So that sometimes we feel like training, if you deliver inset training, knowing that coaching will follow, it's just way better, because you don't have to, you're setting the training tees up the coaching that follows, and that's such a useful not thing to have.
Yeah,
so
I
those
agree.
are some of the things we find.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think like, and actually it's a big learning point for me as a teaching learning lead, was like, just don't move on all the time. I think there are kind of, like putting rotoring PD in to do a new topic every week, which I've done. I did it early in my career, and I think lots of people are still doing it. I actually think that one of those, a similar misconception comes from the literature on coaching. I'm just trying to see if I've got Get Better Faster on the shelf there, but I can't reach it. But if you're a Paul Bambrick Santoyo coach person, he talks about the idea of highest leverage, which we would have all heard. He's like, what you do when you coach someone is you select the highest leverage step or the highest leverage walkthrough. And actually what we found, again, as an individual coach and as someone who has run a coaching system, is that what that means is that sometimes the coaching's like completely random what people are focusing on week. Like behavior management step, then questioning step, then mini whiteboard step, and I mean, that's wrong, because you would just never teach students like that. That's not a considered approach to curriculum. And so I think Tom's point about like choose a thing that you care about and focus on it until it's been implemented and things have improved in the classroom, and then switch. And it's been there's been a lot of work and thinking from our team about how we stop the kind of, we call it scattered coaching. But which is actually like in one of the key texts. And I think that's exactly the point, is like, we would never, you just would never choose to have your curriculum that way. So why would we coach that way? I do think that's pretty common among schools that are doing coaching right now as well.
And I think that kind of links with whole school PD as well. Like, don't plan out your PD program where you're going to do a different walkthrough or a different goal of Steplab each half term, because you don't know how long it's going to take teachers to really get it and understand it and have practiced it well enough to move on. I think for a PD lead to kind of just go a bit slower and to really respond to what you're seeing in lessons and through coaching all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so one of the we have this process called the 6 design decisions, which is I'll just for the sake of visual variety, I'll just flash it up on the screen. Here we go. It's on our how section, the 6 design decisions, and essentially you every school makes those decisions whether they think of them in this way or not. You know, you basically, who are the teams, who are the people, who's the coaching squad, what's their teaching and learning focus, where does it come from? Is it rose and shine? Is it making every lesson count? Is it teach like a champion? Is it your own? What's the time structure? So how often do the coaching sessions happen? When team meetings? When do the training sessions happen? Like, what's the coaching process? Have you agreed it's precise, praise, probe? And finally, what's your reality check process, which is a kind of gym-like phrase. In other words, how do you use drop-ins, lesson observation, video? So one way or another, you're doing those things, and we find that helpful. One of the things that's interesting that is the simple thing of the time structure, and we find it so interesting how different schools solve that problem. But in terms of what you were just saying there about the scattergunning, it's once you've got that time structure, we just say you have to have it, like see meetings ahead or coaching sessions ahead, and start, but don't, like you say, pre-populate. Like each meeting is more or less an evaluation of how you've done so far, and one of your choices is can keep focusing on the same thing. Another one is, yeah, that's going well. But we use the tennis player. I mean, this is our kind of like stock in trade now. The tennis player analogy is our big like metaphor. If you're going to learn to play tennis at a junior level, beginner level, you still have to have a game. So you might do all your lessons on forehand and then a bit of backhand, then you're going to play a bit of a match. You can't just play a match with the one stroke you've learned, you know. And even very sophisticated players are still working on those core techniques that they learned right back in the day when they started. But they're now thinking more about decision making within the game, like when do I do that and what's the sequence of that? And then you get to really sophisticated discussions about choices and exactly. And so we feel like it's important to always know that there's more going on than just the thing you're focusing on, and that's normal, and not to worry about that. At the same time, you can't just sort of master something and then keep doing it until you've nailed it. You sort of have to sort of get it going and then go, okay, I'm kind of working on that, but let me just work on something else now as well, because then they're both being practiced, and then, you know what I mean? So you kind of find the right rhythm. Now, this is where we get into one of the discussions we haven't really had, is one of the critiques sometimes we feel we get is about implementing techniques versus coaching. And I think this is a really interesting discussion, because we're not saying implement, think, pair, share. We're just saying it's a really common problem that teachers have, that getting children talking in a structured way needs thinking about. So having a predetermined technique is a reference point. But when you're coaching Alison about her year 8s, you're obviously seeing Alison as a person and saying, so how do you find pair talk in your lesson, and does this help you? It's never actually implement it now, you know, it never is that. So, but we do get that critique sometimes. You think, well, that might be what it appears on the surface, but it's not how it feels when you're doing it in a real coaching environment.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the problem is that I'm asked about the autonomy thing quite a lot, because, you know, like, classic critique is like, you know, the approach, which I think we both kind of share, which is that there's a core set of techniques which like help students to learn more stuff, and we kind of know what they are. Is that like suggesting techniques for teachers like takes away their autonomy to choose. You know, and I think the thing is that sometimes school leaders can do stuff which takes away someone's autonomy. You know, it is possible to be in a school with a leader that pushes you around and makes you do stuff that you don't think is right. It's happened probably to all of us. But like, that's not what coaching is. You know, it's not coaching if you're having a conversation where the person you're supposedly coaching doesn't talk. You know, it's their classroom, and fundamentally, they're the person who's going to be making this change. And for them to successfully make the change, it's got to be in their mind. And for something to be in someone's mind, you have to engage in discussion about the thing where like they rehearse the ideas mentally. So I think that's really what coaching means. And I think the point being, if we could not possibly be supporting an approach which is just like a bunch of people bossing people around, because WalkThrus and Steplab works. They're making schools better. And if it was bossing people around, it wouldn't be working.
What I love about the way that you've done this walkthroughs in Steplab and the way we have it is that this is how you would use it. You sort of, and even though I wrote the book myself, when I use it, I talk about it like it's the external thing. So I just say, so shall we have a look at what it says? So what it suggests is that you might do this and then that. So what do you think? Is that something that would be useful? Is that something you think you're already doing? And then it'd be the same in the Steplab. You're sort of going through the suggested options. So what the steps suggest are to do that and then this. How does that resonate with you? And it tees it up. And what's great about that is that you've got like 30, like I said, 30 could be 20 or 50 teaching pairs or coaching scenarios going on. Every single person looking at that common issue is looking at the same thing and is able to sort of have that prompted conversation. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? But it is not saying, do this and then do that. It just isn't.
No.
Yeah, so for anyone listening to this thinking, that this is kind of important. The spirit of the platform is what we're trying to communicate here. The fact that you could, in theory, kind of turn it into a set of laws or something, but who does that? I mean, it's not what it's designed to do.
On that note, I'm just conscious we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah,
Can we have a 30-second takeaway from both of you, and then I'll share one from me. So a takeaway from what we've discussed tonight in terms of using Steplab and WalkThrus in partnership. Josh, I'll come to you first.
Oh, I was hoping I'd have some thinking time. I think that it's about considering the purpose. Like, but both Steplab and WalkThrus, both Tom and I have thought really hard about helping teachers to improve, because like both from practical experience and from looking at a hell of a lot of research. And we've basically taken things which we know work and tried to condense them and codify them in a certain way. Like WalkThrus is a codification of, like effective teaching. Steplab is a codification of what we think of as a highly effective coaching. And that's why they work really well together, by the way. But as Matt says, purpose drives process. Like, it's about making sure that you know why you're doing the stuff. And if you know why you're doing the stuff, then it's likely you're going to be doing the stuff well. Was that 30 seconds? I hope it was.
Just about. Tom?
Yeah, I would say that, although we're both pleased with the kind of popularity of our platforms on their own, there's just no question that in combination, they're really, it's a brilliant combination. And now I'm really thrilled that you can access walkthroughs inside Steplab, because they're going to get the power of Steplab with the kind of the opportunities that walkthroughs offers in terms of the visual steps and the kind of that clustering kind of idea. So yeah, and it allows you to have the structures and the systems which then allow your culture to kind of flourish. Having philosophy and culture, where does it go if you can't deliver it in practice? Schools are very time-bound organizations with time slots, and you need to work the system and develop from there. And that's why I think this is going to be so helpful over the next few years as more and more schools sort of see how it works. Yeah, so we're thrilled. I don't know if that was a very neat takeaway, but I just think the main thing is
I liked it.
I think what Peps would say is supercharge your coaching.
You would. And my key takeaway, I think this really follows on from something both of you have said tonight, is about build your own playbook and don't overload your staff with just everything that WalkThrus offers or everything that Steplab offers. Really think about what's the priority for your school, and then making sure your coaching content and what's available to staff kind of aligns with that, and making sure that you're kind of thinking about your PD program holistically around that priority. That's my key takeaway.
I think that was the best one.
I totally agree. It's part of a whole. So thank you very much for everyone joining.
Thank you very much.
I realise that I'm officially the host of this session because it's not our thing. Honestly, brilliant. So many people joined live, and if you're watching the recording, please get in touch with us. I think just the technical thing, if you're to access both of these things together, you need to be a Steplab user and then tell them that you have walkthroughs as well, and then they activate the thing and then it comes through. So if you already have both, and you see, well, why aren't they communicating? Because you need to tell Steplab to do that, and then it will work. And of course, if you're got one platform not the other, and you join, we offer a sort of 20% discount to anyone who joins new and says, okay, well, I'm using walkthroughs, I'd like to get Steplab. It'll be 20% less, and the same the other way around. So it's sort of cheaper to have.
And you can get in touch at Steplab. Just email hello@steplab.co.
And walkthroughs is hello@walkthroughs.co.uk. Brilliant. Thanks so much, everybody. Really good to have you.
Cheers. Bye now.